Okay, everyone, thank you for joining. Today we are going to do some write together or make together with Judith with calligraphic collages. So over to you, Judith.
Hello, everyone. My name is Judith. I am a mentee under the Symbiosis exhibition and Art of Letters Mentorship Initiative. So my mentor is Marina and my co-mentee is Lisette. They're both in the room today, so hello. A lot of what we were exploring were experimental calligraphy. And I think a lot of what I want to share today, I'll be sharing some examples of some of the things I've played with during the process, some of the things I've been playing with even before this mentorship. And I think towards the end, I want to challenge us to do a piece that has two different scripts, at least two different scripts. But in the meantime, I'll try to give you a few examples so that you can play along and see how you can see examples of how things can be combined in different ways. Okay, so what I'll do is I will share my screen. So as usual, I'm in the middle of making notes each time I have these sessions. So every time I start a piece, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Sorry, there's light from the window. It's a bit bright, so I'll focus on here. A lot of the things I think about at the very start is about why I want to do something. For a lot of times, it can be just an exploration. In some times, it's a lot about reacting to what I've already created and finding out like, oh, the visual impact, how it works. So one of the works I will highlight will be one of the works from my exhibition, from the works I did for exhibition, which is the Inner Garden Letters. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit so that you can see. Okay, so right now this actually looks very graphic, but this set was actually planned on having the words inner, INNERGARDEN. So it actually says Inner Garden Letters. And the whole point of this, I think I was very inspired by exploring my childhood and themes from like learning to write. So one of the examples I want to show you would be my drafts for this side of the work. So I had quite a few drafts, actually more than a few. I've made over 10 of these, but I'm only showing you a few that have significant differences. So this was the very first version that I wrote. And I was very inspired to think, oh, maybe I could write something like Exemplar, where I have formal letters, and the parts in green are actually informal versions of the letters. So for example, this is an M. This part here is a very stylized N. This part here is an O, but here's an O here too. So there's a P here, there's a Q right here, there's R here. So I was playing along with what if our experimental calligraphy could be a form of flourish or decoration or something that would enhance the whole graphic, the whole visual. And I wasn't too happy with this because I wanted it to be more refined. I thought the writing was quite terrible. And so I did many variations where I was planning it out. I did one that was better writing, but it was not strong enough because if you see here, the text is actually very dark versus this one that was very light. It had a very nice Spencerian feel a little bit, but I wasn't happy with it. So I did another version where I tried, oh, the light is a bit annoying, I'm sorry. I tried to do two columns, because I wanted to think, oh, I have two saga seed test tubes here, and maybe I could do something that could mirror that idea. And it became very, very neat. But to me, I felt that it was a bit too neat because there's an energy about the saga seeds that I wanted to convey through in the words as well. So something that was exactly an exemplar which shows, oh, I'm talking about A, B, B, C, C, was a little too literal, was a little too in my face when I was thinking about it. So I eventually went ahead with this one because I felt that it has the most energy. And also it was a good complement visually with my other pieces that I did, which were based on abstract words as well as the formal title, as I would put it. So this piece, I did that based on the meaning intention. I wanted to convey the energy of the saga seeds and the visual impact. So when I say visual impacts, there's something I always think about when I'm doing a work, how the whole piece looks like. And what I do is I have a very simple trick for checking how visually balanced it is. So I will do something like I would half squint at the piece. So I mean, you can't see me visually squinting now because my eyes are very small on the camera, but I'll half squint and I'll see if visually it looks more or less the same, or I can do the equivalent. I'm not sure if I can do this. The equivalent would actually be going out of focus. Okay, this is too focused. How do I not continually focus? I think it's too focused right now. Okay, it's too focused. I was trying to do where I could pull, if I could pull the camera out of focus, you'll be able to see this as a bit blur, and you'll be able to see that this is very light compared to this and this. So the idea of half squinting, if you have spectacles, you can take off your spectacles and you see it as a blur. And as a blur, you can sort of tell that, oh, maybe this one's a bit too light. This one's a bit just nice to fit in with the test tubes. So that's the first part. The idea that I'm fine with these letters not being immediately legible, that people might see as a decoration. And it's just something that's more like a little interesting if you find it. Yeah. So yes, thank you for squinting on your own. It's good to practice this. It's even better if you're like from a distance from your work. But yes, this is what I do a lot of time when I'm trying to find the visual aspect of it. So this is the first example that I'll do. The second example that I want to show is that how do you set up your process to allow you to experiment more? So right now, all you see is a final product where, oh, I have combined different things to make this entire set. But it took a very long time to reach this step. And what I will do is I will share a little bit about my process book. Okay? So
Judith, the camera is a bit laggy, so can you move slower? Thanks.
Okay, sure. I will move a little slower then. Thanks for letting me know. I'll just show a very quick example from, this is what I was sharing before the session began, very quickly. This was the precursor to my process book where, because when I was working in photography in school, I'll have multiple prints of the same thing and I'll pile them up together. So my process has always been very tactile. I would overlayer things. And because I have this, I have a habit of trying to record things in different layers. When I approached the Art of Letters mentorship, I wanted to do a record of how I layered things as well. So this page, if any of you have ever taken Marina's class, she has one that talks about the empty space. Yeah. So this is the first lettering that I did. Yeah. And the second one is just inversing it. In this case, I cheated, I used Photoshop, but in her workshops, you have to do it manually, okay? And then on top of that, I started to draw out the letters based on like the ideas of a tree. So the reason why I would highlighted this, I will actually attach them in this book this way, is to allow me to overlay this part on this directly. So how I set up my process book really is examining what I want to highlight to myself. Because these process books, most people wouldn't see them. It's something like a conversation with my past self. What am I thinking about? What am I trying to explore? So visually, when I have this interactivity, I already form a very clear picture of what I had in my head. And for this one, there is a second page where I was very inspired by the idea of root systems, the idea of planting or seeds. So I had an idea of vertical layers of soil. Okay. So what I did was, in this page, I actually did different experiments of how soil could look like. And I would place them here. So I was trying to test out, oh, maybe the soil could look like this and the grass could look like this. Maybe the soil could look like this and the grass could look like this. And because I kept doing experiments that were working on vertical layers, so in the work that came up from this process, this was part of the work. There were two different layers that were going on. I had a vertical accumulation of layers, which was inspired by the idea of the soil. Let me show you again. Oops, wrong one. So the idea of the soil, the vertical layers, and the idea of multiple layers on top of each other from this process that I was inspired by. So in this case, I was playing with a lot of things, and the idea of this particular soil came from a previous experiment where I was doing roots. So I didn't like the other root samples that I did. I thought they had too much attention being drawn to them. So
Judith, the roots, are they writing? I mean, they are lettering the roots.
Yes.
And the soil.
So all this is writing. The itself is actually this, which is the calligraphy drills that we do. The very base. I overlaid it with, I think, walnut ink. And then this is actually writing, but because I used Lissette's favorite Cola pen for this. So when I wrote the words, the ink spread, and naturally it could not be seen, cannot be read as easily. So let me see if I can autofocus. So the green parts are words that were written about the poem I had chosen. The white part, it was just writing, but actually from some parts you can see a little bit of the writing. Not very much, but still a little bit. And then these outlines that you see green here are the outlines of these letters that I was writing on top as well. They are almost a direct reference. You see they match. So these were based on the outlines of letters that I made to look like grass. So these were some of the experiments that I did. And of course, with multiple layers, it comes with problems like, how would you bind something that had certain depth? How would you try to resolve certain issues like, this is very literal. It's a poem about growing grass, and that I was literally showing the process of growing grass. Like Marina's first thing was that this was too many things. I'm trying to achieve too many things in this. But she also said that it's also very literal, which is a bit of a pity, which I agree. So this ended up being an experiment that never saw the light of day. But I'm just sharing it with you because I feel like it's an important part of the process. So how I do my pages are always based on how I plan what things I'm exploring at the time. Also, the final works are directly influenced by that. Okay. So this is the part about an example, front and back, playing with layers, things like that. So okay, maybe you can focus. Yes. So I want to get eventually to a write together exercise. But in between that, let me run through a few ideas that will give you some ideas of what to play with when we are doing the exercise. Okay. So if you have any paper, like any pencil and any paper with you, I want you to write 3 words down so that you can keep it in mind. The words are mentoring, learning, and journeys. So these 3 words are words that I want you to play with subsequently. Just write it down in the corner first. And then after that, I'll walk you through how I want you to play with them, okay? These are words that I chose from the Symbiosis exhibition as well. Like when Dorothy was describing the journeys, how the mentoring and learning is a parallel. They are collaborative, interactive partnerships. I thought this was a very good choice of words to play with, okay? So before you start playing with this, there are two things to keep in mind. Whatever you play with visually, hopefully it will reflect the idea of collaboration and a parallel relationship between the first words, okay? So these two should have some relation to each other in some way. And if it's possible, maybe you can write 2 different scripts, okay? So before I ask you to start writing in exploring, I'll run through a few things that I think are quite useful that might be able to spark a little bit of ideas for you, okay? So the first one is the idea of the color wheel. So I know it doesn't look blue. It was blue when I wrote it, but it didn't turn out blue. But this is just a simple idea of the color wheel where the opposite colors are complementary. So blue and orange are very opposing colors, and they will stand out when used in contrast to each other. So what I mean is when applied to a work, this was one of the drafts I did for another of the art pieces in the work, in the exhibition. And I used green and very dark red brown to contrast the words. So in the technique of writing crisscross, there is a process of making this not as legible. But also in the choice of color, I made it easy that if anyone would want to read the text, they can, because all the green text ran one way and all the red text ran another way. So thinking in terms of color, you can use different colors to play with in terms of, let me see, yeah, focus. The second thing you could think about is having large and small text. So the idea that if you have text that is bigger and smaller, they could work together. I'm not sure if I have a direct example of that, but in here, in this example, I actually use very small writing here, lettering here, and I hid the names of my brothers. I wrote the words family, I wrote Perera and Lee, which are my surnames. So all of these are all hidden within the line. And because I wrote them smaller, you would think of it as line instead of text at first glance. Whereas because I placed this as the largest element, you read this, but might see this as an image instead. So in terms of the size, it could be a way of differentiating. This one's a very simple element, the idea of overlapping. So the idea that if you have two different colors and they overlap, be careful that some things cannot really be read. So for example, this says a partial overlap. But if you notice that the A, the first A is a lot more legible than the second A because of how it's overlapping and how the space within the second A is broken up. So when playing this, it's interesting. I would also show you another one that I did where I was playing with a visual idea of an infinity loop. So I did an infinity loop in pencil. And what I did, I think the pencil marks are still here actually. And what I did was I literally just wrote mentoring, learning, journeys. So the idea of how mentoring and learning are parallel or collaborative journeys, I use visual metaphors to play with that. Okay. So the reason why I'm running through all this is the idea that we can all play with words in different ways instead of just writing it as it is. So in a lot of my work, I'm also very inspired by textures. When I have leftover ink, I'll play with them. And even my writing can be inspired by a texture. For example, this one, it says roses are red, violets are blue. So this was one of the test pieces for actually the Inner Garden letters. Before I started on this theme, I was playing with quotes and old poems that we would write as children. And this was an experiment that I did based on backgrounds as well. So these are some examples that I wanted to show. And I'll show one more example, which are from my old experiments. So I'm showing you all these examples to give you ideas of possibly how you can write these 3 words, okay? Take whatever ideas you can or is useful. This is just a very simple composition I did a while back, where it's literally just writing the word joy over and over and over again. And in this case, I didn't really vary the script. It's not the best writing. I wrote it in a hurry, but I was trying to show the idea that, oh, by varying the size and color, I could play around a lot of composition. So this was one. The second one was an example of how paring back can actually be a very good idea. So, sorry about the light. I had written the same thing in 2 different ways. This was my original one where I talked about when the shoe fits, the foot is forgotten. I started to play with the idea of a shoe. I started to play with the idea of a belt. I started to do a lot of things here. And I realized that the beauty of it really was in the words. And I was not reading it when I was playing with this. So when I found this piece of writing, I played a lot, but I eventually went back to this because I wanted to talk about the words itself, the vertical format versus the horizontal format. So sometimes playing with words can be very fun. You can keep it as part of your process, but after that, you have to consider whether it works in your favor. So in a lot of cases, in a lot of my experiments, they actually don't. But in this case, it's easier to go back to something that is simpler. Okay. So after all these examples, I'm thinking of asking all of you to start working on the composition. I will work along with you on a new one that I haven't tried. I was playing with some ideas, and maybe for the next 5, let's say 10 minutes. For 10 minutes, play along with the 3 words that we wrote, mentoring, learning, and journeys, and see how you can play with the idea of collaboration and different scripts. Okay. If possible, I'd like people to show their work if possible, but if not, then we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, I would work one with an idea that I had already tried last night, the idea of two things joining together and inspired by the background. And at the end of it, I'll show you two variations I did last night just to share how I think and analyze the process of working on these, okay? Let me find my Cola pen when I can find it. If you have any questions about the process, please unmute and you can just talk to me. So if not, I'll invite all of you to just do a piece very quickly. Yes, I put them. Yeah. So how I always start is that I always do a pencil draft. And then I will play along with this.
Judith, this is the part where we are going to do our own explorations, right?
Yes. So I'm inviting everyone to do a piece that talks about mentoring, learning, and journeys, these three words.
Okay.
And mentoring and learning should have some kind of connection in the way they are written.
Okay.
And it should have, if possible, at least two scripts. Yeah.
It can be experimental, doesn't have to be any formal scripts, right? It can be just...
No, it doesn't need to.
Yeah, okay, great.
You can write in all caps if you want. You can write in pencil. You can use any tools that you want. Keeping in mind all the examples I showed you. So it's just the idea of how do you write and play a little bit based on what you have around you and the idea that you convey. And in this process, I think one of the things I want to invite everyone to remember is that the first draft that you're doing may not turn out well. And it's okay for it not to turn out well. I think the one thing I want to encourage is to just play without being critical of your own work. And then only after the work is finished, do you come back and see if it's successful, if it's fun, if it conveys the idea that you wanted to, okay? So if anyone is done, you can just write in the chat that you're done. I'm going to give you about two or three more minutes to continue writing and playing. And then after that, I'll share a little bit about the different variations I've done, both now and later. And I'll talk a little bit about the process of these, okay? 2 more minutes. Okay, 1 more minute. And everyone should be putting the finishing touches. I see a few okays. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing a few dones. Thank you, Marina. And maybe I will continue a little bit. Okay. Done enough. That's a good answer. Done enough. When you can take a break and just look at your own work. Okay. So let me continue with what I have. So this was a piece I did just now based on a sketch that I had last night, where I was thinking of, oh, maybe the journeys are parallel, they're coming together. So when I was this, I did 2 scripts. I did it on a paper that was purple because I thought, oh, maybe blue and red, it could play around with it. And the first thought I have when I see this is I hear Marina's voice in my head telling me, Judith, you're trying to do too many things. Okay, so you need to simplify. So when I'm experimenting, I try not to let the inner Marina's voice telling me not to curate myself. But when I experiment, that's the fun part, okay? So I had this idea of, okay, they should come together. I put them together. The background's too busy. The scripts, I think they're fighting a bit. So it's not really a collaboration. They're more like raring to fight her. So as a piece, I think it's not as effective as it could be. But let me go through a few more examples that I did just last night. And you can see the different variations, okay? So I did this one, which is even more roughly written, but it was also inspired by the textured background. So this one was based on something I had used a roller brush to create. And when I saw this, the first thing I thought of was a road. I thought of, okay, what if mentoring and learning were both the lanes of a road? So I started playing with this idea of a very rough writing. I kept the scripts somewhat similar. There are 2 types of sorts, but I kept the color the same. I kept the treatment the same. And I was exploring, okay, maybe this can be an idea of how it's a rough journey. It is something that is in parallel to each other, and in the way they are working off each other. So this is one variation that I did last night. But I still wasn't happy because it was very rough and it didn't give me the enjoyment of the process. It didn't bring out the final details of mentoring and learning that I want to show. So the thing I kept from this was I like the idea that it's flipped, that there is one that reads this way and there is one that reads this way. Okay. So learning from this piece, what I did was I went to count the letters and I realized that learning has 1 less letter than mentoring. So what I did was I wrote the words mentoring in corticized italics. Okay, let me focus it. So this is in corticized italics. When I flip it around, in a version of Spencerian that I tried to squeeze in, I wrote learning in between. Okay, and I tried several variations of this. Oops, sorry. And one thing I realized is that if I kept the X height the same, the learning the same as the mentoring, it would lend to very chaotic scripts. It could work, but it was a little chaotic. So in this case, I decided, okay, maybe I should reduce the X height so that when I look at one glance, I can see learning as the one with a shorter X height in one direction. I wrote the words journey, like learning journeys here, because in here, I was trying to respond to the space in between these two, the descendants. And because this is it is a softer script, it's a more lyrical script. So I wrote this in a very simple cursive type way. Okay. I wouldn't dare to call this Spencerian because it's not Spencerian, but I linked up the letters, okay? But in here, because I wrote italicized Gothic here, sorry, I Gothicized italics here. So I wrote the words in a form that was spread out, in a form that was that mirrored the lettering that was written above. So if I were to redo this, I could possibly write this in blue. So mentoring journeys, and then in walnut, mentoring journeys. So there will be a direct correlation. If I were to play around with this, there are different ways to play around this, but I wanted the idea that these words combine in a way that may not be immediately apparent, because this technique of sorts only works if the letters correspond to each other. Like there'll be one less letter in one of the words than the other. So for example, I did this piece a while back where this will take a little bit of time to read because it's actually all in caps. UNITED, united with words. So in this case, I had one in all caps, one in lower caps, lower case.
Lowercase.
I had two different colors. I was playing a lot with the words of united, but I kept the words very simple. So playing along with ideas of how we can combine text in different ways, either in between spaces, either in between, like in the composition of it, or even in just how you lay it out, can be very interesting. So for example, something like this where I chose the abstract to be representative of a graphic, and then because I added in the colors, you would think of this as a graphic more than text. The way I place this is like those childhood cards, they'll say that alphabet cards, A for apple, B for boy. I wanted to recall the aesthetic where I did this. When I was writing United with Words, I wanted to highlight the idea that our words are what unite us. So the words are in between the letters of united. When I was writing this, I was trying to think of, okay, I wanted it to be a parallel journey, but the learning is not immediately apparent when we think of mentoring. When we think of mentoring, we think of, the mentor and the mentee, we think of, I am learning from someone. But I think in a lot of conversations that I had with Marina and Lisette, I feel like we both learned a little bit in different ways. And that because Lisette's way is so polished, is so beautiful in how she does the experiments, I'm learning from her too. And I hope Lisette also learns a little bit from my chaos. I don't know. But in a way, I wanted to highlight the idea that there are ways of portraying very simple words in ways that can convey the idea just by using the visual. You don't have to write anything more. It doesn't need to be over embellished. It can just convey the message enough. Okay. So that's about all I have for my sharing, which is a little bit early.
Can we see what everybody has done? Is it possible to
okay, let me stop
share?
sharing. If we have a gallery view, I'm not sure if you can see what everyone is sharing. Oh, I see Lisette.
Nice. Wow.
If you have
nice.
Oh, wow.
Mine is
Cindy's one is really cool too. If everyone can just hold up your pieces a little closer. Oh, those are nice.
Nice. Wait, I need to do. Wait. Are you capturing the screen, Judith?
I am trying to. Wait, 1, 2, 3. I have captured like 5 pieces. So everyone that has done something, maybe you can tag me on Instagram and I can share that in a post.
Yeah.
So that I can highlight everybody who has done something during this workshop. Because I would really love to see some of the works in detail. I see a lot of highlighters. I see actually a lot of different colors, which I'm enjoying a lot. Yeah. And thank you all for attending this session. That's all I have for sharing. But if any one of you want to see my other notebooks, if you want to ask about my process or talk about anything else, I can share along with you.
Yeah. Any questions for Judith about the presentation or what she has done?
Judith, you showed so many of your variations in your folder. How do you decide which one to pick? They're also gorgeous.
So during the mentorship, I had a superpower in which I could call a Marina and Lisette to give me an objective opinion.
I knew you would say that. So Marina has trained you enough now. So how I don't know if you could put it in one sentence, or how do you decide which one? I know Marina is playing in your head. I wish she could play in all our heads, but but each one of your pieces, while I was looking at your folder file, the process itself, the journey itself is so beautiful. And every time you add or remove an element, it gives you a different perspective to how to look at it. Like at one point you said there's too much of words crisscrossing and getting into each other. The next step probably you thought of is how do I change the script, how do I change the color? So there's so many layers to it. So how do you know which one to keep and which one to probably use it for your next experiment? I know it's too much in one question. Loaded. So it was a loaded question, but I tried doing. I'm not an experimental calligrapher, but then having taken Marina's session and looking at both of you, I don't know. I mean, I've always been very organized, very neat, very clean. But looking at this, some part of my brain got a little spark and said, okay, this looks nice. But when I looked at your folder, it was like, oh my God, all of this, it looks like a mess, like you said initially, but then there's so much beauty in that mess. So this is all I could create.
Oh, nice.
Ooh,
so I'm trying to put in my journey. How do I kind of blend my journey into the learning and mentoring process? So, but I keep going back to your folder and say I'll probably keep looking at it all day and not get any work done.
So it's a very long question. Thank you. I love that you're trying different things. You're right in that I have a lot, and it's the hardest part I had during the entire exhibition, as Marina can tell you, was really curating the idea of deciding which things to include and which things to exclude. And to be honest, when I'm writing these things, the moment when I'm writing, it is the most amazing thing ever. I believe that I'm creating art, I'm creating beauty from my fingertips at the moment when I write. Okay?
We all witnessed it. Yes. It's beautiful.
Yes. But the moment I put down my pen and I leave it for a minute, I come back to it 5 minutes later, I will find every possible mistake there is in the writing, in the colors, and in the part of my head will be Marina's voice going, Judith, you went over again, scale it back. And what I'll do is that I would start to dissect the artwork, okay? So for example, let me share the piece that I created just now, and I'll show you how I analyze it, okay? So if you see, this is my initial idea. I wanted the idea of the learning and mentoring to come together in the journeys, right? And when I wrote this, the first thing I see after I put down my pen was that it's very hard to read the word learning, because right now when I unfocus and I squint at this, the one thing that jumps out at me is mentoring. It's very bold, it's very dark. Everything about it is screaming the word mentoring, but the letters learning journeys is very, very fine. So right now it's too much contrast. And in this case, the background, I think in terms of layers, right? The background is not helping the legibility of learning. In this case, the background is working against the writing that I've put on top of it. So although I have tried to tie it in with both blue and red, but it's not working because the background is distracting. It's not adding anything to the conversation of collaboration. And I find that it's just trying too much, but the word mentoring just appears and that's all I see. Okay. If I were to analyze this one, so the whole part of this is, in this case, because I'm talking about roads, the background texture actually helps. It helps in the expression of this idea of the roads. It helps in the idea of, oh, I simplified it. It's just two letters in the same treatment going opposite ways. So as an idea, I think this one is a bit more successful. In terms of execution, because I enjoy Spencerian, so I love the fact that there is a little bit of fine and thick contrast here. So when I was doing the final piece, I was thinking, okay, how can I play along with the idea of different directions? How do I simplify it in ways that would have a little bit contrast, but yet still a little bit of aesthetic to it. So in this case, I chose this script because it's bolder. So mentoring is still the first thing you see. Same as this, mentoring is still the same word. But in this case, I've cleared out the background, so it's a lot simpler. I have kept the word journeys in a very simple to read manner. So there's actually no question about the journeys part. So the only issue would be how this blends together with this, right? And some of the things I noticed, like I said, when I first did this, I thought this was amazing. I was like, oh, this is a really fun idea. I've got it. I did 5 variations of this. Like the first ones were something like this, where I was trying with different excites and stuff. This was an old one. And Learning. I misspelled learning in this one because I was so focused in trying to do it pretty and do it right. So when I was focused on that, I had spelling errors. But when I was writing this, I was very conscious of the contrast. In order to read this properly, like for example, let me show you here. If this was all in monoline, if all of this was in very fine, the same thickness as this, it wouldn't be as easy to read the word learning. So I was very conscious to add in the shades so that even when it's in between the bonus of these letters, I can still make out the different letters. So the shades were important for me when writing this. When I was writing this, I was very conscious to avoid the descenders. When I was writing mentoring, I wanted to leave enough space. But even then, I think the part that this connects to this is not as successful as I would like, because I think it's a line of thickness that goes around here. So there's a bit of congestion here. I will have left a bit more space. So each time after I write, I'll always leave it for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, in which I'll come back to it and see all the mistakes and then start to remove one thing, the background, remove the script. What did I like about that? What did I not like about that? And then I have this secret ultimate technique for distancing yourself from the work. So what I'll do is that I'll take my camera, I'll take a photo of the work from top down, like this exact angle, top down, and I would look at it again, maybe after 2 or 3, maybe a few days or a few hours. And when you look at it as a photo from a top-down angle, suddenly the work will change. Your view of the work will change. How you think of the work will change. And that's how I distance myself from the writing. So when I look at all my experiments now, like for example, if I look at this again, I don't remember writing it. I don't remember what I was feeling when I was trying to write all of these things. I don't remember at all. I purely see it as a visual, and then I analyze it as a visual. So if I were just to very quickly analyze, the first things I would say would be, oh dear, what happened that my line actually went here when it's supposed to end up here? You know, why, when it's like this, it's quite busy. So maybe if I were to redo it, actually fill up some of these to allow for a little less legibility, but more prominence of this image. Each time I step back from the work, I look at it a few hours later, a few days later, a few months later. It's a new conversation I have with myself about how I would edit that. Yeah.
I want to say something on behalf of Judith. What she does, it's wonderful because she has a million ideas. She has a million questions, and she does not mute herself. She keeps on working. So in that process, that is awesome. You have to make yourself questions in order to keep on going beyond. If not, you're always on your comfort zone. You're doing always what you know. Instead, when you start asking yourself questions, and this is something I always tell the students, the ideas are like clouds within your brain. Clouds can't be manipulated. You have to turn it into something that you can, let's say, mold, I don't know, touch, grab, and turn it into something else. So those ideas, whenever you put them on paper, and it's always, it's not Judith, it's the whole world of the artist or any creator. Something is the idea, and the idea is a mile from what it turns to be on paper, on a stone, or on any surface where you work with. So that is a huge step you're giving from an idea to put it on paper. And then in paper, you can manipulate it and you can start judging. Was it right? Was it wrong? Is the right color? All the questions that Judith has been going through. And there's another tip you could use, which is at least for me, it's very good, is that when you are working on something, just take a picture of a step, then go a little bit forward, take another picture of the step, go a little bit forward, take another picture of the step. Don't worry that you can damage, that you can ruin the piece. Just keep on going a little bit forward, because that is the extra step of going into the unknown. We are always worried that we are going to ruin the big piece. If you take a picture, you will know when to stop. And if you go further and you ruin it, it doesn't matter. You've learned, and you can redo the piece again till the step you thought it was the proper one. But in going that little step beyond, there's the learning. Maybe it did not work in that situation, but that is a learning that will work in some other future work, let's say. Sometimes the ideas need time to mature, just like whatever in nature. You need time and you need fresh eyes. Come later to your work, see it from another perspective, see all the steps you are going through, and then judge when was the right spot to stop. And also another tip it works for me is take a picture with your cell phone and see the image in the cell phone where you can't see the detail because you're seeing the overall piece in a small scale. So there it will pop up. What is most important, it will pop up, and you will ask yourself that question. Is this the most important thing I wanted to enlighten? Because this is the first thing you see when you look at this tiny little image in your cell phone. So what I loved about Judith, and Lisette can stand by my side, we were overwhelmed. Whenever Judith came up with a book, she was doing so much stuff. And so that is wonderful. It's like, I always say, it's like having flour, egg, or water to make a piece of a cake, or going into the mall store. You have everything in the mall store. You can do so many cakes. Instead, with 3 elements, you just have very few possibilities. So Judith was always on the supermarket, on the mall. The thing was, we need to make a cake. We can't make a catering for 100 people. We just need to make one cake. So let's go backwards. Let's do the cleaning. And that is another part of the work. That is, it's as important in the process of learning as producing. You have to know, you have to hold back at some point. You have to, although you have taken a lifetime to do something in detail and it was time consuming, at some point, you have to be honest with yourself and say, this is not working. Even if I gave my life, my blood is in, and tears are within the piece, it's not working. I have to quit. I have to give it away. I have to put it on the drawers. Maybe some other time it will work in some other situation, but you have to let it go. So we really enjoyed so much our learning experience. It was a 2-way directional, definitely 3-way directional, because we were 3. So it was, and Judith was, she has a method, and that is awesome. And she has a method, and she knows how to take notes, and she's detailed, and she does a record of everything she does. So there is the memory keeper. I don't know. It's a, you can always go back to those notes, and you took one path in a moment, but maybe 2 years later you come back to these notes and you decide to take the path you did not search enough, and there's a whole world to look for. So kudos. Judith, it was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you, Marina. It
you,
was so refreshing to hear that. You know, it was like the clouds dissipated. Thank you.
But can I also add one thing? So this is what Marina told me when I was showing her this, that it was too much, too literal. And at that moment I was showing her this was my pride and joy. I was convinced that I had at least one piece for the exhibition. And when she said, it's not quite working, there was a moment when I was just like, oh no, I have to redo this all over again. I had that moment. And I think it's internally, when I'm analyzing all my work, there's always this part where I'm being overcritical. There's always also a part that I'm a little set back, that it's not as perfect as I want it to be. But in some cases, you have to judge whether it's good enough for what you want it to be, or you need to let it go and redo. Like in my case, I read it. I'm very glad I read it. But there's always that moment of, why is it not as perfect as I had it in my head? Why is it not as perfect as I thought it would be? You know, that moment is always hard to get over. So thank you, Marina, for being honest. You know, I think your honesty and you're responding to every piece as I showed it is it's a gift that you're giving to all of us. It's given us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Oh, Marina, you're muted.
sorry. I know I am there. It's not something that happens to the rest of the people and we, the teachers, know all the responses. No, it's just the other way around. So when you are aware that you know those feelings, you know frustration, but from frustration, you stand up again. You have to keep on working. You have to keep sitting and working. And eventually there will be a moment where the aha moment will happen. And then everything will fall in place. But it's a journey. That's why process is so important. And that's why questioning yourself keeps you pushing you beyond. If there's a moment when you say, I have the perfect piece, that's the end of your career.
Oh, wow.
You can't never, ever say it. Martha Graham said it in a wonderful way, like it was, we are always kind of slightly disappointed of what we're doing, but that keeps on going. That keeps us on going. And that is wonderful. It's a blessing. It's not a curse. It's a blessing. Never think you have made it. Never think you have done something perfect. Because whenever you have that feeling, you're done.
It's so good. Thank you, Marina.
Yes. Every time you have that feeling, you're like, you should tell yourself, that's ego talking, Scale it back.
Exactly. Ego talking, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, today we have come to the end of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording here.